Hello, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and today I want to speak directly to you. Not as a teacher, not as a coach, but as someone who understands exactly what you're going through. Because if you're here, it probably means you're already trying. You've already studied, listened to lessons, watched videos, maybe even taken a few courses. But somehow, when it's time to actually understand people speaking English in real life, it all feels different, harder, messier, faster, and even a little unfair. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a conversation, maybe on the phone or in person, where someone was speaking English and you knew the words they were using, but still couldn't follow what they were saying? You caught the first sentence, maybe the last one, but the middle felt like a blur? If that's ever happened to you, you are not alone. In fact, I want you to know something really important. This is not your fault. It's not because you're bad at English. It's because the way most of us learn English isn't the same as the way we hear it in real life. So here's a question to guide today's episode. What if I told you that the way you listen is more important than what you hear? Think about that for a second. Because learning to understand real-life English doesn't start with more vocabulary or more grammar. It starts with training your brain to listen differently, to listen actively, with purpose, and with real-world situations in mind. See, many learners study English in a clean, organized way. Slow dialogues, perfect pronunciation, textbook phrases. But the real world? It's messy. People talk fast, they blend words together, they use idioms, accents, emotions, and they don't wait for you to catch up. So what you need isn't more rules. What you need is a new way to train your ear for the English you actually hear around you. That's what we're going to explore today. I want to show you how you can shift the way you listen, so you can finally understand English, not just in lessons, but in cafes, airports, meetings, phone calls, movies, and spontaneous chats with strangers. Because English is not just a language you study, it's a language you live. Now, before we dive in, I want to tell you why this topic matters to me. Over the years, I've worked with learners from all over the world, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, I can read in English, I can write, but when people speak fast, I freeze. Or, I understand my teacher but not people in the real world. That's a pattern, and it's one we're going to break, starting now. But first, I have a small request. If this episode already feels like something you've been waiting for, if you've ever felt stuck between knowing English and understanding it, then do one small thing for yourself and for others like you. Hit the like button and subscribe to this podcast, not just because it helps us grow, but because it tells the algorithm to share this content with more learners who need it. People just like you who want to listen, learn, and live in English with confidence. We're a community, not just an audience. And that means we grow together. When you leave a like, when you subscribe, when you comment about your own experience, you're not just helping yourself. You're helping someone else, somewhere in the world, feel less alone in their journey. And I think that's a pretty beautiful thing. Now let's take a deep breath together. This isn't a test. This isn't about being perfect. This is about improving, step by step, with tools that actually work. You're not here to impress anyone. You're here to understand, to participate, to enjoy. And yes, to make real progress, one real-life listening moment at a time. So let's set the tone for today. Wherever you are, walking, commuting, washing dishes, maybe sitting quietly with a notebook, I want you to listen with your whole self, not just with your ears. Listen with curiosity. Listen with kindness toward your mistakes. And listen with the belief that you can, and you will, get better. Because here's something I've learned from working with so many incredible learners around the world. Your brain is capable of more than you think. When you give it the right input, the right exposure, and the right mindset, it adapts, it grows, it rewires. So even if you've struggled to understand fast English before, that doesn't mean you're stuck. It just means you haven't trained with the kind of English that reflects real life. And that's what this episode is all about. Real-life English. Fast, clear, natural, not slow or artificial or scripted. We're going to look at how to prepare your ears and your mind for the kind of English you'll hear in cafes in Berlin, subway stations in New York, offices in Amsterdam, or hostels in Dublin. We'll walk through stories of real people, just like you, who faced real listening challenges and found simple, practical ways to improve. No magic? No shortcuts, just consistent, focused practice with the right kind of material. And the best part? You don't need hours of free time. You don't need to move to an English-speaking country. You don't even need expensive materials. You just need a few minutes a day, a good strategy, and the willingness to try. If you can give me your ears for a few moments today, I'll give you tools that you can carry into every future conversation. This is not just about understanding English. It's about making English a part of your life, not something separate, not something scary, something useful, something beautiful, something that connects you to the world. So let's begin. Let's take the first step together. You're ready. You're here. And that's all you need right now. Let me tell you about Marta. Marta is a graphic designer from Warsaw, Poland. She's 32, confident, creative, and incredibly dedicated to self-improvement. For years, she studied English through traditional methods. She had flashcards, workbooks, grammar guides, and even weekly online classes with a teacher from London. Her vocabulary was strong. Her grammar was nearly perfect. She could read emails, write proposals, and even give short presentations in English. On paper, Marta looked fluent. Last spring, Marta was invited to a design conference in London. It was her first time visiting the UK, and she was excited. She planned everything: her hotel, her outfits, her slides for the presentation. She even prepared small talk questions to use during the networking events. She felt ready, organized, and equipped. Her English? Solid. Or so she believed. The trouble began the moment she arrived at the train station. After landing at Heathrow, Marta followed the signs to the express train. She found the platform, checked the screen, and waited. A few minutes later, a voice came through the loudspeaker. It was fast, unclear, and full of unfamiliar rhythms. Something about platform changes and delays. Marta froze. She didn't understand a word of it. She looked around, confused, trying to see if anyone else reacted. Some people started walking. Others stayed. Marta panicked. She didn't know whether she should board the train, wait for another, or ask for help. This was the moment that changed everything for her. It wasn't that she lacked the vocabulary to understand the announcement. She knew all those words: platform, delay, departure. She had seen them in exercises before, but she had never heard them spoken like that, so quickly, so naturally, in that context. It didn't sound like her audio lessons. It didn't follow the clear, structured pace she was used to. It was real, unscripted English, and it completely threw her off. Eventually, she asked someone nearby what was going on. A woman kindly explained the train had changed platforms. Marta followed her, boarded, and made it to her hotel. But that train station moment stayed with her. It shook her confidence. She kept thinking, how can I have studied so much and still feel lost in such a basic situation? And that question led her to an important realization, one that many English learners eventually discover. Classroom English is not the same as real-life English. Marta realized that she had been preparing for tests, not for life. She had trained her brain to look for rules, correct forms, and expected answers. But in the real world, English is messy. People speak fast, skip words, mumble, use slang, have accents. It's unpredictable. And more importantly, it's based on sound, not just written form. Marta had spent years reading English, writing English, but very little time truly listening to it in the way it's actually spoken. When we talked later, she told me, I thought I was fluent, but I wasn't fluent in real-world English. I was fluent in textbook English. That sentence stuck with me because it's something I've heard so many times from people all over the world. And it's why I believe that listening, real listening, is one of the most underrated but essential skills in learning a language. After that experience, Marta changed the way she practiced. She stopped listening only to slow, educational dialogues. Instead, she started using podcasts, YouTube interviews, short clips from news channels, and videos where people just talk naturally. She listened to airport announcements online. She searched for real train station recordings. She even started watching travel vloggers who documented their journeys in places like London and New York. Her goal was no longer to understand every word, but to become comfortable with the sound and rhythm of English as it's actually spoken. She told me something else that I think is powerful. She said, I stopped trying to understand everything. I started listening for meaning, for tone, for keywords. That shift made a huge difference. Within weeks, she began to notice patterns. She could catch phrases like, due to a delay, now, arriving, or this service will terminate at, even when said quickly. Her brain began to adjust, not because she learned more words, but because she changed how she listened. And here's the important part. Marta didn't spend hours every day studying. She made small adjustments. She listened to short clips on her phone while having breakfast. She played announcements while brushing her teeth. She didn't just study English, she surrounded herself with it. She created an environment where her ears could adapt naturally, just like a child learning their first language. It was practical, consistent, and real. Marta's story is not about failure. It's about discovering the gap between classroom learning and real-life application, and doing something about it. It's about realizing that knowing English and understanding English in real contexts are two different things. And it's about learning to close that gap through exposure, repetition, and a change in mindset. She still laughs when she remembers that train station moment. But now, she uses it as a reminder that language is not just something you study, it's something you experience. And the more you put yourself in real listening situations, even small ones, the more fluent and confident you become. So if you've ever had your own train station moment, if you've ever felt lost in a simple situation, even after years of study, remember Marta. Remember that it's not about knowing more English. It's about listening to the kind of English you'll actually encounter in daily life. That's where the real learning happens. Let's talk about one of the most powerful skills you can develop as an English learner: active listening. Now, I know you've probably heard this term before. It sounds familiar, maybe even a little technical. But today, I want to strip it down and really talk about what it means, how it's different from passive listening, and why it might be the one thing holding you back from understanding English in real-life situations. Because once you understand the difference, you start to hear things you never noticed before, even when people speak fast. Let me start with something honest. Most learners think they're practicing listening when they play an English video or podcast in the background. And while that's not bad, it's often not enough. That's passive listening. It's when you hear English, but your brain is not fully involved. Maybe you're doing the dishes, maybe you're scrolling on your phone, maybe you're just hoping that something will stick. And sometimes it does, but only the surface level stuff. You might recognize a few words. You might catch a phrase or two. But when someone speaks quickly or uses a new accent or a different tone, you get lost again. That's the limit of passive listening. Active listening is completely different. It's not just about hearing words. It's about processing them. It's about being mentally present and trying to understand the meaning behind the words. And that changes everything. Because in real conversations, you don't have time to translate each word. You don't get subtitles. You don't have a pause button. So if you've only trained your brain to wait for keywords or clear grammar structures, you'll struggle. But if you train your brain to listen actively, to follow the flow of meaning instead of chasing individual words, you'll understand much more, even when the language gets messy. Here's an example. Imagine someone says, "Hey, I'm going to grab a quick bite before heading back to the office." If you're listening passively, you might not catch anything beyond office. The phrase "gonna grab a bite" might go completely over your head. But if you're listening actively, you're focused on the idea. You ask yourself, what's this person doing? Where are they going? What's the situation? And even if you don't understand every word perfectly, you can guess that they're taking a short break to eat before returning to work. That's comprehension. That's what real listening looks like. I've seen this pattern with many of my students. They come to me saying, "I can't understand fast English." But when we slow things down, I notice they're not actually trying to understand the full message. They're just waiting for words they recognize. And that's not their fault. It's how most of us are trained in school. We're told to memorize vocabulary lists and focus on accuracy. But language isn't a list, it's movement. It's connection. And to follow that movement, you need to listen with attention, purpose, and flexibility. So how do you shift from passive to active listening? First, change your goal. Stop aiming to understand every word. Instead, aim to understand the intention. What is the speaker trying to say? What's the context? What's their tone? Are they making a request, giving information, telling a story, expressing emotion? These clues help your brain predict meaning even when you miss some words. That's how native speakers listen too. They don't hear every single word clearly, but they get the message. Second, practice with intention. When you watch a video or listen to a podcast, don't just let it play. Pause and ask yourself, what did I just hear? What was the main idea? Can I repeat it in my own words? Can I predict what's coming next? You can even listen to a short clip twice, first for the general idea, then for more detail. And if you still miss something, that's okay. Listen again. Later. Repetition is part of the process, and each time, your brain gets faster and more accurate. Third, stop translating in your head. This one is big. When you listen actively, you let English enter your brain as English. You don't stop to convert it into your first language. You simply absorb the sound, rhythm, and meaning. And yes, that takes time to develop. But it starts with awareness. Every time you notice yourself translating, gently bring your focus back to the message. What's being said? What does it mean in this moment? Another helpful trick is to pay attention to tone and emotion. Sometimes the tone gives you more information than the words themselves. If someone sounds surprised, tired, excited, frustrated, you can usually feel that even if you don't catch the full sentence. That emotional awareness is part of active listening. It helps you respond naturally because you're tuned into the speaker's intention, not just their grammar. I also recommend using transcripts, when possible. Listen first without the text, just to challenge your ear. Then go back and read along. Notice what you missed. Were there words you didn't hear clearly? Were there phrases you misunderstood? Seeing them written down helps you connect the spoken and written forms. And over time, this builds your listening confidence. Here's something else I've noticed. People who develop strong listening skills usually stop worrying so much about speaking. Why? Because when you understand what others are saying, you feel more relaxed. You start to notice how people respond, how they build sentences, how they express ideas. Your speaking becomes more natural because it's based on real examples, not memorized phrases. So listening actively doesn't just improve comprehension, it improves everything. Let me leave you with this image. Imagine standing in front of a river. Passive listening is like watching the water flow without moving. Active listening is like stepping into the river, feeling the current and moving with it. You're not trying to control it. You're learning to flow with it. That's how English works in the real world. And the more you train yourself to move with the rhythm of natural speech, the more fluent, flexible, and confident you become. You already have what it takes. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need to understand everything right now. You just need to stay present, stay curious, and practice listening in a way that invites your brain to grow. Active listening is not a talent, it's a habit, and it starts with one small shift. Listen for meaning, not words. Let me introduce you to Samuel. He's originally from Lagos, Nigeria, and he moved to Paris a little over a year ago to study architecture. He's smart, motivated, and determined to become fluent in English because he knows how important it is for his career. He already speaks French and Yoruba, and English has always been part of his education. His writing is excellent. He reads articles, understands technical vocabulary, and even helps classmates with grammar sometimes. But something unexpected happened that made him rethink how he was learning. One afternoon, Samuel walked into a small cafe near his university. He wanted a coffee to take with him before heading to class. Simple, right? He stepped up to the counter and said clearly, "Hi, I'd like a small coffee, please." The barista, a young man with a cheerful smile and a fast, casual way of speaking, replied with a short question. Samuel froze. He heard the words, but they didn't register. The barista had said something like, "For here or to go," but with a thick local accent and quick rhythm that Samuel wasn't expecting. He didn't recognize the phrase. In his English classes, they had used more formal language like, "Would you like to drink it here or take it away?" But this was real life, and no one talks like a textbook. Samuel just stood there for a second, confused. He smiled, unsure what to say. The barista repeated the question, this time with a little more volume but still just as fast. Samuel hesitated, then just pointed to the door and said, "To go." The barista nodded, made the coffee, and everything went on as usual. It was a small moment, over in seconds, but it left a big impact on Samuel. He walked out of that cafe feeling frustrated, not because he didn't know English, but because he realized something very important. He didn't know how people really speak English in casual, everyday situations. When he told me this story later, he laughed and said, "Julia, I've written academic essays in English, but that tiny question in the cafe, I had no idea what the guy was saying. It sounded like one long word." I've heard this kind of thing before, and maybe you've experienced it too. You study English for years, but when someone speaks quickly, or uses informal language, or has a regional accent, it's like you're hearing a different language. And that's because, in a way, you are. English changes when it's spoken naturally. It becomes faster, more connected, and full of local color. Samuel's experience in that cafe helped him see the gap between classroom English and real-world English. He realized he had trained his brain to understand clear, slow English. But real life doesn't slow down for you. People speak the way they always have, and if you want to follow, you need to train your ear to keep up. That's when Samuel made a decision. He was going to stop, relying only on formal learning materials. Instead, he began to surround himself with the kind of English he actually heard on the streets, in shops, in cafes, and in casual conversations. He started small. First, he looked for YouTube channels that featured everyday dialogues, real people talking about normal things, not teachers, not actors, just real conversations, unedited, natural, full of small talk, interruptions, and expressions he wasn't used to hearing. At first, it was hard. He had to listen to the same clip several times. Sometimes he understood nothing on the first try. But instead of getting discouraged, he used it as training. He would write down phrases that confused him, look them up, repeat them out loud, and then listen again. Slowly, patterns started to emerge. He realized that "for here or to go" is one of those phrases people say so fast it sounds like one single word. "For here or to go." It's not just about vocabulary, it's about sound. He also began listening to podcasts while walking around Paris. Nothing too long, just 10 or 15 minutes a day. But the difference was that he focused on content where people spoke naturally, not in a scripted or overly clear way. He listened to people chatting about their weekend, talking about a recipe, discussing their favorite books. And slowly, his ear started to adjust. After a few weeks, he began recognizing phrases without translating them. He could anticipate the rhythm of a sentence. And when someone spoke fast, he didn't panic anymore. He listened for the key idea, the tone, and the context. One day, a few weeks after his cafe incident, Samuel returned to the same place. He ordered a coffee, and once again, the barista asked the same quick question. But this time, Samuel didn't freeze. He smiled and answered right away. "To go, thanks." It was simple, but powerful. That moment showed him that progress isn't always about big, dramatic breakthroughs. Sometimes it's about small wins that prove your brain is adapting, that your listening is sharper, that your confidence is stronger. The secret to Samuel's improvement wasn't studying harder. It was listening smarter. He chose materials that reflected the way people actually speak, not just the way they teach. He exposed himself to different accents, tones, and rhythms. And he didn't worry about understanding every single word. He focused on understanding the message. That shift made all the difference. I often tell learners, don't wait until you're ready to listen to real English. Start now, even if it feels messy, even if you don't understand everything. The earlier you expose your ear to the natural flow of English, the faster you'll grow. You'll begin to recognize patterns, anticipate meaning, and feel more connected to the language. Samuel's journey is one I hope inspires you, because it shows that listening is not about perfection, it's about training. It's about building familiarity with how English sounds in real life, in real speed, with real people. And it starts with one simple choice: to listen with intention and to choose materials that reflect the world you're preparing to live in. Let's talk about something that can completely transform the way you understand English: context. It's one of the most powerful tools you already have, and most learners don't even realize they're not using it to its full potential. When I say context, I mean everything that surrounds the words you hear: the situation, the place, the tone of voice, the body language, the topic of conversation. These elements are not just background. They are clues, and when you learn to use them well, you don't need to understand every single word to follow what's happening. In fact, many native speakers rely on context more than they realize, and so can you. Think about how children learn their first language. They don't start with vocabulary lists or grammar exercises. They learn by being in situations where language has meaning. When someone says time to eat while pointing to the table, the child connects the words with the action. When someone says, put on your shoes near the door, the child learns that phrase as a whole unit, connected to leaving the house. They don't need to translate or break down every word. They understand because the context gives the words their meaning. Now let's apply that to your experience with English. Have you ever heard someone say something in English and felt completely lost until you noticed their facial expression, their hand gestures, or the place where you were standing? Suddenly things started to make more sense. That's context at work. It fills in the gaps. It gives your brain extra information so you can guess the meaning, even when the words themselves are not clear. One of the biggest mistakes I see learners make is trying to understand everything from the words alone. They focus so much on decoding every sound, every syllable, every sentence, that they forget to pay attention to what's happening around those words. And that creates unnecessary stress. Because real-life English is not perfect. People mumble, they use slang, they change topics quickly. If you're relying only on the words, you'll get lost. But if you use context, your brain can make smart guesses, and those guesses often turn out to be correct. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you're at a restaurant and the waiter walks over and says something quickly. Still working on that? If you isolate those words, they might sound confusing. Still working on what? But in context, it's easy to guess. You're sitting at a table, there's food in front of you, and the waiter is looking at your plate. Suddenly it makes sense. He's asking if you're finished eating. That's a very common phrase in English, but even if you didn't know it, the context tells you what it probably means. You don't need to translate, you just understand. This is why I always encourage learners to practice English in real situations, or at least simulate them. When you're watching a video, don't just listen to the words. Look at the setting. What are the people doing? How are they standing? What objects are around them? What is the mood? Is it serious, casual, funny, emotional? All of this helps your brain process the meaning faster. It's like giving your understanding an extra boost. And over time, this habit of using context becomes automatic. Context also helps you deal with fast speech. Native speakers connect words together in ways that are hard to catch if you're listening word by word. But if you know what's going on, your brain fills in the blanks. For example, if someone says, "What you up to?" very fast, it might sound like one strange sound. But if you're already in a conversation and the person looks curious or friendly, your brain might guess, "They're probably asking me what I'm doing." And you'd be right. That's the power of context. Another part of context is tone of voice. Often, how something is said is more important than the exact words. If someone says, "Oh, really?" with a flat voice, they're probably just asking for more information. But if they say it with a high dramatic tone, they might be expressing surprise or even sarcasm. The same words, different meanings. Your ability to understand depends on how well you pay attention to tone. And the more you listen to real English, the better you'll become at picking this up. Visual cues are also a huge part of understanding. If you're in a face-to-face conversation, watch people's faces, hands, posture. Humans communicate so much without words. A smile, a raised eyebrow, a pause, all of it gives you information. And even when you're watching videos, you can still practice using visual context. For example, in a travel vlog, you might not understand every word the speaker says. But if they're standing in front of a beach, holding a towel, and smiling at the camera, it's clear they're talking about their day at the beach. You can understand 80% of the meaning just by using what you see. Now let's talk about how the brain works. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. The more it sees or hears certain words used in familiar situations, the faster it becomes at predicting meaning. This is why watching similar scenes repeatedly, like ordering at a cafe, checking into a hotel, or asking for directions, can be incredibly helpful. Each time you give your brain more examples to work with. And soon, when you're in a similar situation in real life, your brain recognizes the context and fills in the blanks before you even realize it. I've seen this happen with so many learners. Once they stop trying to understand everything word by word and start focusing on the bigger picture, their confidence grows. They stop feeling overwhelmed. They become better at guessing meaning from clues. They realize that it's okay to not catch every detail, as long as they understand what's going on. And that shift makes English feel much more natural and manageable. You don't need to memorize every phrase. You need to feel the situation. Put yourself in it mentally. Ask yourself, where are we? Who's talking? What's the purpose of this conversation? What might come next? This kind of thinking helps your brain stay active and engaged, even when the language gets fast or informal. Using context is not cheating. It's smart listening. It's how real communication works. No one understands 100% of everything all the time, not even native speakers. But the difference is that fluent listeners know how to use all the clues around them. And you can learn to do that too. Start noticing the background. Pay attention to tone, emotion, location, gestures. Trust that your brain is capable of filling in the gaps, especially when you train it with meaningful real-life input. And remember, you don't have to catch every word to understand the message. You just need to be present, aware, and open to what the context is telling you. That's where real understanding begins. One of the most important things I've learned from working with English learners all over the world is this. What surprises people most isn't the vocabulary or grammar. It's the way English sounds in everyday situations. And that's totally understandable. When you study English in school or through traditional courses, the language is often presented in a clear, slow, structured way. You hear each word separately. Sentences are pronounced fully, often with textbook intonation. But that's not how people actually speak English in real life. Spoken English is faster, more connected, and full of reduced sounds. And if you've never trained your ear to recognize those patterns, it can feel like a completely different language. I want to talk about that difference today, because understanding it can change how you approach listening and how confident you feel when native speakers talk. Let's start with something simple. You probably learned the phrase going to, as in, I am going to study, or she is going to call you. That's how it's written, and maybe that's how your teacher pronounced it. But in natural spoken English, people rarely say it like that. Instead, they say gonna. I'm gonna study. She's gonna call you. It's not lazy. It's not wrong. It's just the way the language naturally changes in everyday conversation. And that's only one example. Let's look at want to. In a book, you'll see, do you want to come with me? But when someone's talking quickly, it becomes wanna. Wanna come with me? Again, it's not slang. It's just the natural flow of speech. Your brain might expect want to, but it hears wanna, and suddenly it feels confusing. The sounds don't match what you studied. This happens constantly in English. Words that are separate on the page become connected in speech. Sounds drop, change, blend. What do you want to do? Turns into what do you want to do? Did you eat yet? Becomes jeet yet? And even if you know all the words, you might not recognize them when they're said like this. That's not your fault. It's a result of how English is taught versus how it's used. Here's why it matters. If you don't expose yourself to real spoken English, you'll keep feeling surprised when people speak naturally. You'll think, I know this language, but I can't understand it. And that's frustrating. It creates self-doubt. You start, to think you're not good enough, when really, you just haven't trained your ear for how English really sounds. This is where exposure becomes essential. You need to hear English as it's spoken in real life, by people of different ages, accents, and backgrounds. That's how your brain begins to recognize the common shortcuts. That's how you stop being surprised by fast speech and start feeling familiar with it. Repetition is key. The more times you hear a phrase like gonna or wanna in context, the faster your brain will catch it next time. It's also helpful to understand the logic behind this. English, like many languages, becomes more fluid in daily use. We tend to prioritize speed and rhythm, which leads to words being shortened or blended. Native speakers don't do it on purpose. It's not about being difficult. It's just a natural process. And once you begin to expect that change, It's much easier to follow along. Let's try another one. The question, "What are you doing?" often becomes, "What you doing?" It's quick, casual, and very common. If you're waiting to hear the full sentence, you'll miss it. But if you've heard this kind of phrase enough times in real conversations, in TV shows, in YouTube videos, it starts to click. Your ear says, "Ah, I've heard this before." And suddenly, it's not strange anymore. It's normal. This is why I always recommend that my students listen to real conversations, not just lessons designed for learners. Find interviews, vlogs, street tea, interviews, podcast conversations, even reality TV. Listen to how people actually talk. Notice the sounds that disappear, the words that combine. Don't worry if you don't catch everything at first. That's part of the training. Your brain is adapting every time you listen. And this isn't just about speed. It's about rhythm and melody too. English has a certain music to it, and that music comes from how we stress some words and reduce others. Function words like to, of, and, is, are, often become weak and almost invisible. But content words, like nouns, main verbs, and adjectives, are stressed. So in a sentence like, "He's gonna call you in the morning," the important sounds are gonna, call, and morning. The rest flows around them. If you train yourself to focus on the meaning words, you'll catch more than you think. Another common area where this happens is in question forms. Take, "Do you know what time it is?" In real conversation, that can easily become, "Do you know what time it is?" Or even faster, "Do you know what time it is?" And yet we still understand each other. Why? Because we're not listening for perfect words. We're listening for patterns, for rhythm, for context. If you've ever felt frustrated because someone spoke too fast or didn't pronounce words the way you expected, please know that this is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're stepping into real English, and that's a good thing. You're leaving behind the artificial world of slow, clear, controlled speech and moving toward the natural, flowing, everyday rhythm of the language. The best way to become comfortable with these changes is through repeated exposure to the real thing. Even just a few minutes a day can help. Choose something you enjoy. A travel vlog, a podcast, a casual interview. Watch it more than once. Listen with subtitles first, then try without. Pay attention to where words shrink, where sounds connect, where the rhythm changes. With time, your ear will adjust. It's also okay to mimic. Repeat what you hear out loud. Try saying gonna, wanna, whatcha in your own voice. You don't have to sound like a native speaker, but the more you practice speaking the way people speak, the more natural it will feel, and the more easily you'll understand others. So yes, everyday English sounds different. It's faster, it's more casual, it bends the rules. But that's not a problem, it's a signal. It's a sign that you're now listening to the real thing. And that's where fluency lives, not in perfection, but in connection. In the space between what you expect and what you actually hear, and in your ability to bridge that gap with practice, awareness, and patience. Keep going. Your ears are learning more than you think. Luca is a 29-year-old software engineer from Milan. He works for a global company and often travels for conferences and meetings. His English is good. He studied for years, took the TOEFL, and even had some practice in professional settings. But what happened one morning at the airport made him realize that knowing English and being ready for real-world English are not exactly the same thing. He was flying from Milan to Amsterdam for a tech summit, and like many of us, he got caught in traffic on the way to the airport. When he finally arrived, he was late, anxious, and sweating. He rushed to the check-in counter, hoping to explain himself and get on the flight. The airline employee looked up, nodded quickly, and started giving him instructions. But it all happened so fast. Luca heard a blur of sound. Something like, "Gates changed, boarding soon, straight ahead, left at security, no baggage drop." But none of it felt clear. He couldn't process it. His heart was already racing, and now he was confused. He asked, "Sorry, can you repeat that?" The employee repeated it, but again at the same fast, natural pace. No slower, no simpler. This wasn't a classroom. It was an international airport, full of movement, noise, and people who didn't have time to slow down. Luca nodded, pretending to understand. He walked in the direction the agent had pointed, but within minutes he realized he was completely lost. He had missed the gate number. He wasn't sure which hallway to take, and he felt embarrassed. He kept thinking, why is this so difficult for me? I know English. Eventually, he found a help desk and asked again, this time with more focus. They gave him the correct gate, and he made it just in time. But the experience left a mark. That moment of panic, that rush of fast speech in a high-pressure situation, showed Luca that his listening skills weren't ready for the real speed of English. It wasn't a vocabulary issue. He knew the words. It wasn't grammar. He could write formal emails. It was simply that his ear wasn't trained to catch spoken English the way it's naturally used, especially in busy, fast-paced environments. Later that evening, sitting in his hotel room, Luca made a decision. He didn't want to feel that lost again. So he asked himself, what do I do every day that I could use for English practice? The answer was obvious. He commuted to work by metro every morning. About 25 minutes each way. That's almost an hour every day. He realized that instead of scrolling through social media or just listening to music, he could use that time to train his ear. The next morning, Luca downloaded a few podcasts in English, not academic ones. He chose ones where people talked casually, interviews, daily conversations, story-based episodes. He didn't try to understand every word. He just listened. At first, it felt a little overwhelming. Some speakers talked fast. Some had accents he wasn't used to. Some used expressions he had never heard in class. But he kept going. Each day he listened during his metro rides. Sometimes he repeated phrases quietly to himself. Sometimes he listened to the same short segment 2 or 3 times. He didn't make it a chore. He didn't force himself to take notes. He just listened, consistently. And something started to happen. After about 2 weeks, he began to notice patterns. He could predict what people were going to say. He started recognizing expressions like, you know what I mean? Let me think, or it should be fine. He got better at catching meaning from tone and context, not just words. Luca told me something really interesting during one of our calls. He said, I used to think listening was about hearing words, but now I realize it's about feeling the flow, following the message, and relaxing into it. That shift in mindset made a huge difference. He stopped translating in his head. He stopped panicking when he missed a word. He trusted that his brain would catch enough to understand the message, and it did. A month later, he had to fly again, this time to Dublin. When the airline agent spoke quickly at the check-in counter, Luca didn't freeze. He caught the main points, confirmed the gate, and asked a follow-up question clearly and calmly. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. And he didn't feel overwhelmed. He told me afterward, it was such a relief to feel in control, like my brain was finally moving at the speed of the conversation. That's the power of consistent, simple practice. Luca didn't change his schedule. He didn't add hours of study. He just used the time he already had, his commute, to expose himself to real English. Not textbook English, not slow, scripted English, real English. And it trained his ear in a way no grammar book ever could. This kind of daily exposure helps more than most people realize. When you listen to native speakers talking naturally, your brain starts to adjust. You stop expecting perfect pronunciation. You start recognizing reduced sounds, informal phrases, and natural rhythm. And over time, you begin to understand even when things move fast, even in stressful moments like airports, train stations, or busy restaurants. I always tell learners that fluency isn't about speaking perfectly, it's about functioning in real-life situations. And that starts with listening. If you can understand instructions at an airport, follow directions on the street, or catch the meaning of a casual chat, you're already fluent in the ways that truly matter. And the path to that kind of fluency is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's consistent. It's listening to 10 minutes of English while you brush your teeth or walk to work or sit on the train. It's repeating a phrase until it feels familiar. It's hearing the same word in different accents until it finally makes sense without thinking. That's exactly what Luca discovered. He didn't need to study more rules. He just needed more contact with the language as it's really used. His story reminds us that progress doesn't always feel like progress at first, but it builds. Bit by bit. Sound by sound. And one day, when you least expect it, you realize your brain has caught up with the language. That's when you know you're ready. One of the most common questions I get is this: Julia, how can I improve my listening skills with real English? And I love this question because it shows that you're ready to go beyond the textbook. You're ready to hear English as it's spoken every day, in cafes, in airports, on the street, in meetings, in small talk. That's where the real magic of language happens, and training your ear for that type of English is one of the most powerful things you can do. But let's be honest. At first, listening to real English can feel overwhelming. People talk fast. They use slang. They skip words. They speak with different accents. You understand a few words here and there, but not the full message, and that can feel frustrating. You start to doubt yourself. But here's what I want you to remember. It's not that you're not good at English. It's just that your brain hasn't been trained yet to recognize the rhythm, speed, and style of natural speech. The good news? You can train your ear, and it's simpler than you think. Let me walk you through a practical way to do that. It starts with choosing the right kind of audio. You don't need complicated academic material. What you need is real conversations. People speaking naturally. That could be a podcast where two friends talk about their weekend, a YouTube vlog from someone describing their day, a short documentary where someone shares a story. The key is that it's real, unscripted, or spoken in a natural rhythm, not designed for learners. Once you have your material, here's the first step. Listen without subtitles or transcripts. Yes, without. I know that sounds difficult, but it's important. Your goal here is not to understand every word. Your goal is to catch the general meaning. Focus on the emotion, the topic, the voice. Is the person excited? Are they telling a story, asking a question, giving instructions? Even if you only understand 30 or 40%, that's okay. This first round is like warming up. Your ears. You're letting your brain absorb the sound without the pressure of full comprehension. After that first listen, play it again. But this time, turn on the subtitles or read the transcript if it's available. Now you're connecting the sounds with the words. You'll probably say to yourself, so that's what they were saying. This is the moment when things start to click. You begin to notice how certain phrases are actually spoken, how sounds are reduced or connected, how some words disappear or change in fast speech. For example, you might realize that "what are you doing" becomes "what you doing," or that "going to" becomes "gonna." Seeing the transcript after hearing the audio helps bridge that gap. Then, I want you to listen a third time. Turn off the subtitles again, and now see how much more you understand. You'll notice a jump. Your brain has now matched the sound with the meaning, and on this round, things feel clearer. Maybe you understand 70%, maybe more. That's real progress. One of the most powerful strategies I recommend is repetition. And I know it doesn't sound exciting, but it works. Take a short audio clip, maybe just a 1-minute conversation, and listen to it multiple times. Day 1, you might only understand a few words. Day 2, you catch full phrases. Day 3, it feels familiar. By day 4, your brain predicts what's coming next. This is when real fluency begins. Not when you memorize new vocabulary, but when you recognize the sound and rhythm of language in real time. This is how native speakers develop listening skills too. We hear the same phrases, tones, and expressions over and over again until they're automatic. Think about your first language. How many times did you hear, "How are you?" or "What's going on?" before you really understood them? It was repetition, in different voices, in different situations. That's how language enters your brain and becomes part of your memory. So make repetition your friend. Find a few clips that you like. It could be someone telling a story, an interview, a movie scene, a funny podcast moment. Play them again and again. Try shadowing, repeating the audio out loud after the speaker. This helps with pronunciation, rhythm, and also makes your listening sharper. When you repeat what you hear, your brain learns what to expect, and your ear becomes quicker at noticing when something changes. Another tip I love is to choose content that you enjoy. Don't force yourself to listen to something just because it's educational. If you like travel, find travel vlogs. If you enjoy comedy, watch clips from funny interviews. If you love cooking, listen to recipe videos or food podcasts. When you enjoy what you're listening to, you stay more focused. You're not just learning English, you're having a good time in English. That makes the experience feel natural, not like homework. I also encourage you to vary the accents and speaking styles you hear. Listen to American, British, Australian, and other international speakers. Listen to people speaking fast and slow, formally and casually. This variety will stretch your listening skills and prepare you for the real world, where no two people speak exactly the same way. And yes, at first it may feel confusing. But after a while, your brain becomes incredibly flexible. You start noticing which phrases are universal and which ones depend on culture or region. Sometimes my students tell me, "But Julia, I don't have time." And I get that. Life is busy. But this doesn't have to be a big-time investment. Even 10 minutes a day is enough to make progress. You can listen while brushing your teeth, walking the dog, riding the bus, cooking dinner. You can even re-listen to a short clip while waiting in line or doing chores. It's not about how much time, it's about how often you do it. And don't worry if you miss things. That's part of the process. There's no need to understand everything the first time. Listening is a skill that grows quietly. You don't always notice the changes day to day. But then one day, someone says something fast in English, and you get it. You don't translate. You don't panic. You just understand. That's the moment your training pays off. You're not just learning words, you're tuning your brain to a whole new frequency. The more you listen, the more that frequency becomes familiar. It stops feeling like noise and starts sounding like language. Your brain adapts. It connects sound to meaning. Faster. It knows what to expect. And that's when listening becomes natural. That's when fluency begins to feel real. So don't wait until you feel ready. Start with what you have. Choose a voice, a clip, a moment, and train your ear. Make it a habit. Listen without pressure. Let your brain do its work. It already knows how to learn. All you have to do is show up and listen. Let me tell you about Ayaka. She's a university student from Tokyo who moved to the UK to pursue her degree in international business. She's always been a dedicated learner, organized, responsible, and passionate about languages. Her English skills were solid when she arrived. She could write essays, follow lectures, and even give presentations. But there was one situation that completely caught her off guard and made her feel like a beginner all over again. A phone call. It happened during her second semester. One of her professors had asked students to schedule individual appointments to discuss their upcoming project proposals. Most students sent an email or dropped by the office, but Ayaka decided to call. She thought it would be more direct and respectful. So, she took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and dialed the number written on the course guide. When her professor answered, everything suddenly changed. The voice on the other end was fast, casual, and full of natural English patterns, reduced sounds, connected phrases, no facial expressions, no gestures, no context. Ayaka froze. She had prepared what she wanted to say, but as soon as her professor responded with something like, "Hi, yeah, sure. What time were you thinking?" her mind went completely blank. She had no visual clues to help her, no lips to read, no body language to follow. Just a fast stream of English coming from her phone speaker. She panicked. She asked him to repeat. He did, kindly, but still at the same speed. She tried to respond, but her words felt clumsy. She ended up apologizing, asking if she could email instead. The call lasted barely a minute, but it felt like the longest, most uncomfortable moment of her academic life so far. After the call, Ayaka felt embarrassed and frustrated. She kept thinking, "I understand English. I speak English. Why did this happen?" But the truth is, this wasn't a failure. It was a common, very human reaction, because listening on the phone is one of the hardest challenges for language learners. When you're on a phone call, you lose all the extra support that helps you understand. Facial expressions, hand gestures, the setting, even lip movement. You're relying only on sound. And if you're not used to that, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Ayaka realized that her listening skills were strong in face-to-face settings, but not when there was no visual support. And instead of avoiding phone calls forever, she decided to train. She created her own system, something simple she could practice every day. She began listening to recordings of simulated phone conversations, Things like customer service calls, appointment bookings, casual chats between friends. These weren't perfect audio lessons. They were messy, fast, real, just like what you hear in everyday life. At first, she didn't understand everything. She replayed each call several times. She wrote down what she heard. She tried to repeat the sentences aloud. She didn't rush. She gave herself permission to struggle. And slowly, she started recognizing patterns. She noticed how people say, "Can I speak to," or "just a second," or "let me check." She realized that people interrupt each other, change subjects quickly, or mumble when they're distracted. And over time, these patterns became familiar. What helped Ayaka most was focusing on one key principle. She didn't need to understand every word, just the function of what was being said. Was the speaker giving information? Asking a question? Confirming a time? Expressing doubt? She trained her ear to recognize the purpose of the sentence before trying to understand every syllable. That shift in mindset was huge. It reduced her anxiety and helped her focus on the message, not the noise. She also practiced shadowing. She would listen to a sentence from the call, pause the audio, and repeat it out loud, copying the intonation and rhythm. This helped her not only understand the language better, but also feel how it sounds. It connected her ears and her voice. It made the language more physical, more real. After a few weeks of doing this every day, even just 10 or 15 minutes, she noticed a change. She was no longer afraid to pick up the phone. She started calling for things like takeaway orders, appointments, and even calling her professor again, this time to confirm a meeting. And it went well. She still had to concentrate. She still asked people to repeat sometimes. But she didn't freeze. She didn't panic. She knew what to expect, and her brain was ready to catch the message. Ayaka's experience is one I hear all the time. Many learners feel confident in reading and writing and even in speaking during lessons or meetings. But take away the visual context, like in a phone call, and everything becomes harder. That's completely normal. We rely on more than just sound to understand. But that also means we can train our brain to adapt. And just like Ayaka, we can become confident listeners, even without the visual support. One of the best ways to do this is to create short listening routines focused specifically on phone conversations. There are tons of resources out there: English learning apps, YouTube channels, podcast episodes, even real-life voicemails or call center recordings. The important thing is to choose audio that feels real, not too polished or slow. Then repeat it. Listen once just to get the overall idea. Then again with a transcript if available. Then again, repeating key phrases. You don't have to understand everything on the first try. You're not trying to pass a test. You're trying to train your brain. And remember, the goal is not to sound perfect. The goal is to understand and respond in a natural way. That means recognizing when someone's asking for information, or when they're offering a suggestion, or when they're confused. If you train your ear for those moments, you'll be able to navigate most phone conversations, even if you miss a few words along the way. Ayaka's journey is a great example of what happens when you face a challenge and turn it into a habit. What started as a stressful, uncomfortable phone call became a daily practice that strengthened her confidence. She didn't wait for perfect conditions. She took a simple, focused approach and stayed consistent. And little by little, her listening improved. Not in theory, but in the real-life way that truly matters. One of the biggest challenges learners face when trying to improve their English listening skills is dealing with speed. Native speakers often talk fast, and when you're starting out or even at an intermediate level, that speed can feel overwhelming. You might find yourself trying to catch every word, every sound, every phrase, and when you miss even one, it feels like you've failed. But here's a truth I want you to understand deeply. Trying to understand every single word in natural English is not only impossible for most learners, it's also unnecessary. It can actually hold you back. When you listen to someone speaking English at a natural pace, they aren't speaking perfectly, clearly all the time. They connect words, reduce sounds, drop some parts, and rely on shared knowledge and context. That means the listener is expected to fill in the blanks sometimes, to use context clues, tone, body language, and the general topic to understand the message. If you focus on catching every word, you might miss the bigger picture. I often tell my students to think about understanding enough, rather than understanding everything. It's a mindset shift that changes everything. Imagine you're watching a movie in English. You don't need to translate every sentence. You don't need to know the meaning of every single word. You just need to follow the story, catch the emotions, and get the main ideas. That's enough to enjoy and understand. The same applies to real-life conversations. You want to catch enough to respond, to keep the conversation going, to know what's happening. This idea can be liberating. It frees you from the pressure of perfection and lets you focus on communication. Instead of getting stuck on one word, you move forward with what you understood. And guess what? Most native speakers do this naturally too. Even among themselves, people often miss words or phrases, but still keep talking because they understand enough from the context. Now, this doesn't mean you should ignore difficult parts or give up on learning new words. It means that in the moment of listening, especially when the speed is natural, you accept that full comprehension might not happen. You build your understanding little by little, over time, through exposure and practice. Adjusting the speed of audio can be a helpful tool in this learning process. Many learners like to slow down podcasts, videos, or conversations so they can catch every word. That's okay at the beginning. Slowing down speech helps your brain connect sounds with meaning, especially when you're unfamiliar with natural connected speech or reduced forms. But I always recommend using slowed audio as a stepping stone, not a crutch. If you rely too much on slow speech, you might develop a habit of expecting English to come at a gentle, measured pace. Real conversations don't work that way. People speak quickly, interrupt each other, and use informal phrases. So while slowed audio can help you notice details and improve your understanding, you should gradually challenge yourself to listen at normal speed. Here's a strategy I use with my students. Start with slowed audio to get the gist and notice new vocabulary or expressions. Then listen to the same audio at normal speed even if you understand less. Repeat this process several times. Over time, your brain adapts. You get used to the speed and rhythm of real English. But don't get discouraged if you still miss some words or phrases. That's natural. The goal isn't to catch every detail on the first listen. It's to improve your overall comprehension and comfort with the sound of the language. One tip I often share is to focus on chunks of language rather than isolated words. Native speakers don't speak word by word. They use groups of words together, like, how's it going? Or, I'm gonna check that out. When you hear these chunks, you understand the meaning faster. And this helps you keep up with the speed of speech. Another important point is to use your knowledge of the topic to your advantage. If you're listening to a podcast about cooking, you expect to hear certain words and ideas. Your brain gets ready for this, so you can fill in parts that are unclear. When you combine this with accepting understanding enough, you get much better at listening naturally. It's also helpful to remember that comprehension is not a straight line. Some days you'll understand a lot. Other days you'll struggle. That's normal. Don't judge your progress by one difficult listening experience. Look at the bigger picture. Speed matters because it reflects how people actually communicate. If you train your ear to understand English at natural speed, you'll be ready for real conversations. But speed shouldn't make you feel overwhelmed or stuck. Instead, let it be a signal to practice more, to listen to different kinds of content, and to accept that language learning is a journey, not a race. So remember this. Focus on understanding the message, not the individual words. Use slowed audio to learn new sounds and expressions, but don't get stuck there. Challenge yourself to listen at normal speed regularly, and give yourself permission to understand enough. That freedom will help you grow faster than any strict rule or perfectionist approach. Your brain is amazing. With consistent practice, it will learn to process fast English naturally. You'll stop feeling lost in conversations and start feeling like a part of them. And that's when listening truly becomes enjoyable and effective. When it comes to improving your English listening skills, one of the most important things I want you to understand is this. Focus on the ideas, not on individual words. This might sound obvious, but so many learners get stuck trying to catch every single word and lose sight of the bigger picture. Let me explain why shifting your attention to ideas instead of words can make your listening much easier and more effective. English, like many languages, is built in blocks of meaning rather than word by word. When someone speaks, They don't pause after every word for you to process it. Instead, they say phrases and sentences as a whole, carrying meaning in chunks. Your brain needs to catch those chunks, the important parts that carry the message, rather than getting stuck on tiny details that may not be essential. For example, imagine someone says, "I'm going to the store later." If you listen for every word, you might get caught on going to or later and miss the overall idea. But if you focus on the main verbs and nouns, going and store, you get the core message. This person will visit the store soon. Even if you miss the little words, you still understand what's happening. This approach also helps when speakers use contractions, reductions, or informal phrases. Take the sentence, "I'm going to call you tomorrow." If you only listen for the word going, you might miss it because it's pronounced gonna. But if you focus on the idea, someone plans to make a call soon, you don't have to catch every sound perfectly to understand the intention. When you listen for ideas, you become less overwhelmed by unfamiliar words or fast speech. You start to notice the most important parts of sentences, the subjects, the verbs, and the objects. These carry the meaning. Smaller words like prepositions, articles, or auxiliary verbs are important, but usually don't change the main idea. Once you understand this, you can relax and follow conversations more naturally. Let me share a simple example. If someone says, "She didn't finish the report because she was sick," the key ideas are didn't finish, report, and sick. Even if you miss the words because or she was, the main message is clear. She was sick and didn't complete her work. This way of listening lets you focus on what matters most. Another useful tip is to pay attention to the verbs and nouns in sentences, because they often reveal the speaker's intention. Verbs tell you what's happening, and nouns tell you who or what is involved. When you catch those, you understand the core of the message. For instance, in the sentence, "They decided, beta." To cancel the meeting, decided, cancel, and meeting are the crucial parts. You don't need every other word to get the point. This method also helps when people speak quickly or use complex sentences. You might not follow every detail, but if you can grasp the main ideas, you can keep up with the conversation. Your brain will fill in the gaps naturally as you become more familiar with common phrases and sentence structures. When I work with students, I often encourage them to practice this by listening to short clips and summarizing the main ideas instead of trying to write down every word. This trains your brain to focus on meaning, which is the ultimate goal of communication. Another thing to remember is that context is your friend. If you know the topic of conversation, it's easier to predict and understand ideas even if some words are unclear. For example, if you're listening to a discussion about travel plans, you expect to hear words like flight, hotel, or schedule. Your brain uses this context to focus on relevant ideas and not get distracted by unknown words. You can practice this skill with podcasts, videos, or conversations by asking yourself after listening, what was the main point? What did the speaker want to say? This active reflection strengthens your ability to pick out important ideas quickly. It's also helpful to practice with different types of speakers and accents. Different people might express the same idea in different ways. When you focus on ideas instead of words, you become more adaptable. You learn to understand meaning even if the vocabulary or pronunciation changes. Remember, communication is about sharing ideas. You don't need to understand every single word to connect with someone or participate in a conversation. When you focus on the overall message, you reduce stress and increase your confidence. So next time you listen to English, try to catch the main ideas first. Don't worry if you miss small words. Pay attention to the verbs and nouns because they usually hold the key meaning. Use the context to guide you. This way, listening becomes less about perfection and more about understanding and connecting. Over time, this shift in focus will make listening easier and more enjoyable. You'll notice that you can follow conversations more smoothly, even when people speak fast or use informal language. And the best part is, this approach trains your brain to think in English, seeing language as meaning, not just words. Focusing on ideas instead of individual words is a powerful skill that brings you closer to real-life English. It helps you become a confident listener who understands the message, even when the language is complex or fast. This is a key step toward fluency. Daniel is a project manager from Munich, working for an American tech company. His job involves coordinating teams from different countries, and one of the key parts of his role is participating in weekly Zoom meetings with colleagues from the US and other places. When he first started, Daniel was excited but also nervous about these meetings. Although his English was good, he found the speed of conversation challenging. People talked quickly, interrupted each other, used idioms, and sometimes overlapped while speaking. It was hard for Daniel to keep up. During those early meetings, Daniel often felt lost. He would catch some words here and there, but struggled to understand the full flow of the discussion. He was worried that if he didn't respond quickly enough, his team would think he wasn't prepared or wasn't paying attention. This made him anxious, and sometimes he would avoid speaking altogether. Daniel knew he needed to improve his listening skills to feel confident and participate actively. One day, after a particularly stressful meeting, Daniel decided to take control of the situation. He asked his manager if he could access recordings of past team meetings. Fortunately, his company recorded Zoom calls for reference, and Daniel was able to listen to them outside of work hours. This became a turning point in his English learning journey. Daniel started by listening to these recorded meetings without worrying about understanding everything. At first, the conversation still felt fast and confusing, but instead of giving up, he created a simple routine. Each evening, he would listen to 10 or 15 minutes of the meetings. Sometimes he just listened. Other times, he paused and repeated sentences aloud, practicing his pronunciation and intonation. A key part of Daniel's practice was focusing on common phrases and expressions used in work meetings. For example, he noticed people saying things like, "Let's circle back on that. Can you share your screen? We need to align on the deadline." Or, "That sounds like a plan." These phrases became familiar to him, almost like patterns. He started predicting what someone would say next, which made listening easier. Daniel also practiced simulating responses. After hearing a question or comment in the recording, he would pause and try to answer aloud, just like in a real meeting. This technique helped him prepare for situations he knew would come up. It built his confidence because he wasn't just passively listening, he was actively engaging with the language. Over time, Daniel's listening skills improved dramatically. He began to understand most of what was said in meetings, even when people spoke fast or with different accents. He felt more relaxed during calls and started contributing ideas without hesitation. His colleagues noticed the change and appreciated his input more. Daniel's story shows how real-life challenges can become powerful motivators for language learning. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions, he used the resources available, meeting recordings, to train his ear in a natural context. His focus on repetition, familiar phrases, and active practice made a big difference. This approach works because it mimics the real situations you face. When you listen to actual conversations from your work or daily life, you learn the language you really need. You also learn the rhythm, speed, and style of communication used in those settings. If you're in a similar situation, with meetings or conversations that feel too fast, consider recording or finding similar audio. Listen regularly, focus on common phrases, and try responding out loud. This kind of active, consistent practice will help you improve faster than just studying vocabulary or grammar. Daniel's experience reminds us that improving listening is a process. It takes time, patience, and smart practice. But with effort, you can move from feeling stressed and lost to confident and engaged. And that's when language learning becomes truly rewarding. One of the most effective ways to improve your English listening skills is to reuse the same audio in different ways. When I first started learning languages, I used to listen to a short audio clip once and then move on to something new. But what I learned over time is that true improvement comes from revisiting the same material multiple times, each time with a different focus. This method helps your brain absorb the sounds, patterns, and meanings more deeply, and it trains your ear to hear with clarity. Let me walk you through how I recommend practicing with one piece of audio step by step. First, choose a short video or audio clip, something around 1 to 3 minutes. It could be a YouTube video, a podcast segment, or a real-life conversation. The important thing is that you find something interesting and manageable, so you stay motivated and don't feel overwhelmed. The first step is to listen without trying to understand every word. Just listen for the general idea. Let the sounds wash over you. Don't pause or rewind too much. The goal here is to get comfortable with the rhythm and flow of the language. Maybe you catch 50% or less, and that's perfectly fine. This initial exposure is like warming up your ears. Your brain starts to recognize the melody of English, the intonation, and the way words connect naturally. Next, listen to the same audio again, but this time, write down keywords or phrases you recognize. These don't have to be every word, just the ones that stand out. For example, if the clip is about travel, you might note words like airport, ticket, or delay. Writing down these keywords makes you more actively engaged with the listening process. It also helps you focus on the main ideas instead of getting lost in every detail. After that, listen again with the goal of repeating important sentences or phrases out loud. This is called shadowing, and it's a powerful technique. When you repeat what you hear, you're training your mouth to move naturally with the sounds, and you're also reinforcing your listening skills. You begin to notice patterns, reductions, and natural speech rhythms. This stage is especially useful for improving pronunciation and fluency. At this point, if a transcript or subtitles are available, use them to check your understanding. Read along with the audio to connect the spoken words with their written form. This visual confirmation helps you see how words are linked and reduced in fast speech. It also builds your vocabulary and helps you notice grammar in context. Now you might wonder, Julia, isn't this repetition boring? It might feel repetitive at first, but I promise you, it's one of the smartest ways to learn. By reusing the same audio in different ways, you're training your brain to process English faster and more accurately. You're building listening confidence step by step. Another benefit is that repetition helps you learn to predict language. After several listens, you start anticipating what comes next in the conversation. This makes real-life listening much easier because you're not just decoding sounds, you're actively expecting meaning. I encourage you to experiment with this method using videos or audio clips from YouTube or podcasts you like. Pick something short and replay it with intention. One day, listen just for understanding. The next day, focus on writing keywords. Then try shadowing. This variety keeps the practice fresh and engaging. You can also mix it up by changing your environment. Listen while you're commuting, cooking, or taking a walk. Use headphones to catch details or listen out loud to practice your speaking skills. The more you integrate listening practice into your daily routine, the faster you improve. One tip I give my students is to keep a notebook or digital document where you collect new phrases and words from your repeated listening practice. Review this list regularly and try to use these expressions in your own conversations. This way, listening becomes not only about understanding, but also about active language use. Remember, learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. The repetition and reuse of audio give your brain the time and exposure it needs to internalize language naturally. It's not about speed, it's about quality and consistency. So, pick one audio and use it many times in different ways. Listen first, write keywords, repeat sentences, check with a transcript if you can, and then use what you've learned actively. This smart repetition will help you hear English more clearly, understand it faster, and speak it with more confidence. I want to share something very honest with you. Today, something that many learners don't often talk about. Even advanced English speakers make mistakes when listening. Yes, it's true. You might have reached a level where you feel confident reading, writing, and even speaking English well. But when it comes to listening, there will still be moments when things slip through your ears. I want you to know that this is completely normal, and it happens to everyone, including me. Let me tell you about a personal experience that really stuck with me. Not too long ago, I was at a dinner party with some friends. Everyone was relaxed, laughing, sharing stories. Suddenly, someone told a simple joke, something light and funny that made everyone else laugh right away. But I didn't get it. I sat there quietly, trying to process what they said, replaying the words in my head, but the punchline just didn't click. I felt a little embarrassed, but I didn't want to interrupt or ask for the joke to be explained because I thought, I should understand I speak English well. But the truth was, I missed the joke because of the way it was said. Maybe the timing was quick, or the speaker used some slang or cultural reference I wasn't familiar with. Maybe the tone was subtle. Whatever it was, I didn't catch it in the moment. Later, one of my friends kindly explained the joke, and I laughed with them, realizing how easy it is to miss things when listening in real life. That moment reminded me how complex listening really is. It's not just about understanding vocabulary or grammar. It's about catching nuances, emotions, cultural hints, and sometimes humor. It also depends on the context, the speaker's style, and even your own mood or focus at the time. I want you to feel comfortable with the idea that making mistakes while listening is part of the process. It doesn't mean you're not good enough or that you're failing. It means you're human, and it means you're learning. Listening is a skill that grows with time and exposure. When I say exposure, I mean the continuous experience of hearing English in different situations: formal, informal, fast, slow, clear, or messy. Each exposure teaches your brain something new. Some days you'll understand everything, and other days you might feel lost. Both are normal and necessary for growth. One of the hardest things about listening is that it happens in real time. Unlike reading, where you can slow down or reread, listening forces you to process sounds immediately. So, missing parts or misunderstanding is natural, especially in fast or casual conversations. Instead of feeling discouraged when you don't understand something, I encourage you to be curious. Ask yourself, what made this hard to understand? Was it the speed, the accent, the vocabulary, or something cultural? Then look for opportunities to practice that area more. Also, don't be afraid to ask for clarification in real conversations. People are usually happy to help and appreciate your effort to understand. Simple phrases like, "Could you say that again, please?" or "I didn't catch that, can you explain?" are very useful and show that you're engaged. Another important thing is to give yourself grace. Language learning is a long journey. It's full of ups and downs, successes and challenges. When you accept mistakes as part of the process, you reduce anxiety and open the door to more learning. I often remind my students that fluency doesn't mean perfection. It means being able to communicate effectively despite occasional misunderstandings or errors. The more you listen, the better you get. And over time, those moments of confusion become fewer and farther between. So, when you find yourself missing a joke, a phrase, or a sentence, remember that it happens to all of us. Use it as a chance to learn, not to feel discouraged. Keep listening, keep practicing, and trust that your understanding will improve with time and patience. Being kind to yourself during this process is just as important as the practice itself. Listening is a skill that develops slowly, and every experience, even the mistakes, brings you closer to your goal. I hope my story helps you see that you're not alone in this. Listening is hard, but it's also rewarding. The key is to keep going, keep exposing yourself to English, and embrace the fact that mistakes are just stepping stones on your path to fluency. Creating a daily listening routine is one of the most powerful habits you can build to improve your English skills. When I talk to learners, one of the biggest challenges they mention is finding time and motivation to practice regularly. That's why I always encourage you to create your own small ritual, something simple, enjoyable, and easy to fit into your day. The key is to start small and start with joy. Listening to English every day doesn't have to feel like a chore or a lesson. Instead, think of it as a moment just for you, a chance to enjoy something you like while naturally improving your language skills. Maybe you love music, or you're a fan of TV series, or perhaps you prefer podcasts that talk about topics you find interesting. Whatever it is, use that as your listening practice. When you enjoy what you listen to, you stay motivated and curious. You don't need to spend hours every day. Even 10 or 15 minutes consistently will make a big difference over time. The important thing is to make it a routine, something you look forward to. For example, you could listen to a short podcast episode while you're having breakfast or during your commute. If you walk or exercise regularly, try putting on English audio and focus on it during that time. Using moments like waiting in line or doing chores to listen is a great way to turn ordinary time into learning time. I want you to remember this. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is exposure. The more you expose your brain to English sounds, rhythms, and expressions, the faster you'll train your ear. It's like exercise. The more you do it, the stronger and more flexible your muscles become. In the same way, your brain becomes better at processing English the more you listen. If you're not sure where to start, here's a simple suggestion. Pick one thing you like: a podcast episode about travel, a YouTube video with simple conversations, or a few songs by your favorite English-speaking artist. Listen to it without subtitles at first. Try to catch the overall meaning, and don't worry if you miss some words. Listen again with subtitles or a transcript if you can. Then try to repeat some phrases out loud to practice pronunciation. Another tip is to create a listening corner, or a small playlist on your phone or computer with your chosen audios. This makes it easy to access your practice anytime. Having a go-to playlist removes the decision fatigue of what to listen to next, helping you stay consistent. Be patient with yourself as you build this habit. Some days you'll feel great and understand a lot. Other days might be tougher. That's normal. The important thing is to keep going, even when it feels hard or slow. Over time, those small moments of listening add up to big improvements. I've seen many learners transform their English by simply making listening a natural part of their day. They don't wait for the perfect lesson or a formal class. They create their own joyful routine that fits their lifestyle. And that's why I encourage you to start small. Pick something you enjoy, use the time you already have, and make it a daily habit. Remember, this is your journey. Find what works for you. Your routine doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It's about connecting with English in a way that feels good and sustainable. So, start today. Find a song, a podcast, or a series that excites you. Use your commute, your walk, or your waiting time to listen. Start small, start with joy, and watch how your listening skills grow naturally. This is real-world practice. Fun, practical, and, effective. Today, I want to leave you with a gentle challenge that can really make a difference in your English listening journey. Throughout this episode, we've talked about many practical methods to improve how you understand spoken English, whether it's focusing on ideas instead of words, practicing with real audio, repeating phrases, or creating your own daily listening routine. Now, I invite you to choose just one of these methods and commit to trying it consistently for 3 days in a row. That's it. Just 3 days. Why 3 days? Because it's a small, achievable goal that won't overwhelm you, but it's long enough to start noticing subtle changes. When you practice the same approach repeatedly, even in a short period, your brain begins to adapt. You'll start recognizing patterns you missed before. Your ear becomes more tuned to the sounds and rhythms of English, and that's where real progress begins. As you take on this challenge, pay attention to how your understanding evolves. You might notice that after the first day, some parts still feel tricky or unclear. That's normal. But by the third day, you could be surprised to find that things are starting to click more naturally. Sentences that once sounded like a blur might become clearer. You'll feel a little more confident listening to conversations, videos, or podcasts. This is your brain rewiring itself, little by little, with the power of consistent practice. Don't worry about being perfect during this challenge. I want you to focus on curiosity and patience. Mistakes and misunderstandings will happen, and that's okay. They are signs that you are pushing yourself and learning. Every time you encounter something difficult and don't give up, you are strengthening your listening skills and building resilience. If you feel comfortable, I encourage you to share your progress with others, whether it's friends, language partners, or in a community like the English Talk community. Talking about your experience can boost motivation, give you support, and even inspire others to try the challenge too. Remember, language learning is a journey best traveled together. One thing I want to emphasize is that you don't need to be perfect to improve. You don't need to understand every word or never miss a joke. What really matters is that you stay curious and keep practicing. Curiosity opens doors to new learning opportunities and keeps your brain engaged. It makes the process enjoyable rather than stressful. So, as you take on this small challenge, think about it as a chance to explore and discover what works best for you. Maybe you'll realize that shadowing phrases helps you most. Maybe focusing on main ideas changes how you listen. Or maybe creating that daily routine becomes your favorite way to connect with English. The key is to experiment, observe, and keep moving forward. I believe in you. Every effort you make, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goal of understanding English more clearly and confidently. Keep going with kindness toward yourself. Celebrate the small wins and use challenges as opportunities to grow. Remember, learning a language is not about perfection. It's about persistence and curiosity. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to stay curious. That mindset will carry you far and make your English listening journey rewarding and joyful. So take this challenge with an open heart and enjoy the process. I'm here with you every step of the way. Let's keep learning, growing, and listening together.